Well, it's our first ever return guest, and it's Seerut Chawla. How's that? You like that?
Not bad. Not bad.
What? I
Take
made the W a V. I nailed that.
Chawla.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, it's so nice to have you back. Let me introduce you and we'll get right into it. Our first ever returning guest on the Zaddy Zone is Seerut Chawla. Nailed it. She is a psychotherapist based in London, where she works in a private practice. She trained at the University of Roehampton in integrative counselling and psychotherapy and previously worked at the NHS. She describes herself as a bit of a nerd and a big Lord of the Rings fan, and her mantra is, I am not the monk on the mountain. I am in the trenches with you. Now, Seerut, something has happened to you since we last spoke.
Yes.
You seem to have elicited the response of an angry group of people. Can you tell me what happened? What did you do?
Okay, so this is has a bit of a story to it, if that's okay. So it started with the Andrew Tate controversy. You know, some of his videos came out and they were going viral of some of the kind of quite not okay things he was saying about women. And we were kind of watching his meteoric rise. I think he gained about 2 million followers in a couple of months, something like that. And anyway, so we all know what happened, and he got booted off all the platforms. And I noticed a lot of people were saying things like, Andrew Tate got famous because patriarchy hurts men too. And I just thought, come on, like it is, you know, that's the depth of the analysis here. There's nothing else it could possibly be. He got famous because of patriarchy. Anyway, I tweeted that he did not get famous because patriarchy hurts men too. He got famous because there's a growing class of disenfranchised young men. And, you know, his resonance should tell us something. The fact that he got so famous so quickly, you know, he also did have a bit of a cottage industry of his fans sharing his clips. And so, yeah, you know, there was a bit of that going on as well. But overall, someone doesn't have that kind of resonance unless there's a reason. And maybe we should think about that instead of immediately demonizing the people who resonated with him. So in that, anyway, string of tweets, there's 3 or 4 tweets, I can't remember, something I said was that we need to care about men's mental health. And, you know, if we don't want more Andrew Tates, then we need to take this seriously. So then, because I said that, I kept my word and I started talking about men's mental health a bit more. And then I couldn't have predicted what would happen, actually. I couldn't have predicted people would get that angry about it. So to start, I thought it would be more, rather than me making arguments, which a lot of my posts are sort of me making an argument for something, let me just share the data. Because surely you can't argue with the data, can you? But you can. And some of the stats I shared were awful, really awful. Like the more I look into this, the worse it actually seems. The picture the data paints versus the mainstream narrative, they're not married at all. They really aren't. And, you know, something like the biggest cause of death for men under 35, especially in the UK, is suicide. We don't hear about that, do we? I didn't really know. I didn't know until I started looking into this properly. Almost all homeless people are men. We don't talk about that either. Or the fact that there's so little for men out there in terms of mental health. There's a really interesting quote from Warren Farrell. I wrote it down. Who's Warren? One of the people who I found while looking into this was Warren Farrell, and he was a pretty don't know what the right word is, but he was a male feminist. And then he started talking about men's issues because he realized there was a dearth there, and he's been vilified a lot. And he's written a book called The Boy Crisis, which I've just started. It's interesting. But he said something about, so he said he has no problem with society opening up the option for more feminine behavior for men and the same, more masculine behavior for women. But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is making feminine behavior the superior behavior, and making masculine behavior toxic masculinity. And I think that's another reason Andrew Tate was so famous, or got so famous, is because he was leaving aside the horrible misogyny for a second. He was unapologetically masculine. And we don't have much of that, do we? So anyway, I wanted to talk about this. I thought, as a woman, maybe it wouldn't be taken as misogyny, and people would see that it's coming from, like a well-intentioned place. Anyway, they started reporting my posts, and my posts started getting taken down. Just posts with this data. That's it. There was nothing, that violated any of Instagram's policies.
And did it start with, if you don't mind me just interrupting, did it start with your post, Men's Mental Health Matters? That's when they started reporting and they started arguing with you? Or was it when you brought up male privilege?
No, it started with the Andrew Tate post.
Okay.
So they were really angry about that because we aren't allowed to think of other possibilities. We have to say that Andrew Tate is... Yeah, that's the only option. We're not allowed to think of any alternatives, God forbid. So that was the first one that got taken down. Instagram put it back up. Initially, when it got taken down, I thought, oh, maybe this is one of Tate's fanboys who's reported it because it's not completely favorable to Tate, who obviously I don't agree with. That was my first thought because there was so much going on. But as it went on, I was like, oh, no, this isn't that. It's these this group of very angry women. And the comments and the DMs and the Twitter quote tweets, they've been wild. Wishing death on men, laughing at the statistics, saying we should make all of these 10 on 10, because talking about homelessness and the suicide epidemic and just abusive stuff towards me, calling me a bitch, calling me a pick me. I don't even know what pick me is supposed to mean, but
a pick me. Yeah, I saw that. A pick me is reasonably new to me as well. What I used to call people like a fuck boy, it's now called a pick me boy. So it's those guys on TikTok that I always mock, those ones who are like, they're like, I love stretch marks. Those guys are called pick me boys. And so somebody's saying that to you, it's like, you're virtue signaling, and trying to get, laid essentially, which is ridiculous. But let me just read the post for people, because I think I'll start at, let's talk about male privilege, your post entitled that. And these are the statistics that you put forward. 87% of homeless people are men. 9 out of 10 people who sleep rough are men. Most people in prison are men. 94% of people who die at work are men. Most people who die in war are men. Men are more likely to be made redundant and less likely to be re-employed. White working class men are the least likely to go to university. Male victims of CSA and rape get less support than women. International labor laws protect everyone but men. Suicide rates are 3 times higher for men. These are complex issues. However, the overarching theme is that men are treated like they're disposable. Of course, women's issues matter just as much, but they are given much more airtime. You continued, we need to stop pitting the sexes against each other and start taking men's issues seriously too. There's a serious crisis of alienation. A good start would be to get a bit more curious and compassionate about the issues faced by men. And then, if you don't mind, I'll read a couple of these responses from women to you. Good. Another person said, their fault. Another person said, cry it out. Someone else said, need the numbers to be 100%. Someone in all caps wrote, let's go. Someone else wrote, and thank God for that. Someone else wrote, girls, let's do our best to make these numbers higher. Somebody else said, well, fuck you and the men. Someone said, let's aim for higher scores next time. Someone said, yeah, but they deserve it. Someone said, with a little dedication and hard work, we will continue to see these numbers increase. We're doing great, ladies. Deserved, someone else said. As it should be, someone else said. Let's make these numbers higher. Hope the numbers keep rising. Natural selection. This is funny because 99% of these things are caused by said men. 94%? Let's make it 100% soon. We cheered. Not enough dying, in my opinion. Let's keep it going. I will not stop until these statistics are 100% and 10 out of 10. I don't care. They deserve worse. Good. Let's keep it that way. Oh.
What's your reaction as a man?
It's like, are we human together? You know, like, is it hard? Are we not all battling it out? Can we not see that each of us has our own difficulties? You know, the thing about racism that I think about so often is that people who are racist are like, if we allow immigrants or, you know, the people who we think are coming to take our jobs, that we won't have as big a slice of the pie, that we'll lose our bit. But I think that's not true. I think we can all thrive. And I think that the more people that we allow at the table, it doesn't take away resources and goodness and joy from everybody else. And what is this idea that, I mean, it's just pure, it's unbridled sexism that we've come to just accept and go, oh, that's completely fine. That's completely okay to say, is that, you know, everybody who should be committing suicide is a man. Everybody who should be homeless is a man. Everybody who should be in prison is a man. It's like, I just think it's just horrific thinking that is now socially acceptable. And, you know, I could never write that. I could never write anything like that about a woman on your post. You know, nor would I want to, nor would I need to. Yeah. Why is this morally acceptable? Why is this type of thinking morally acceptable?
Andrew Tate got booted off every single platform for saying the equivalent towards women. And he wasn't wishing, he was saying quite gross, very regressive things. But, you know, like he I don't even know. Let's say equivalent. And he got booted off every single platform. But this is absolutely allowed. It's completely socially acceptable for women to do the same thing, and a horde of them. There's no outcry. You know, we're talking about it because we care about it, and like both of us aren't that afraid of like grappling difficult issues. But it's completely socially acceptable to be as awful towards men as Andrew Tate was towards women, and there's no repercussion. It's wild. And yeah, you know, like, well, there's so many things we're not allowed to say. Like, there's biological sex differences. We do know that. And we know there's, for example, there's more violence towards women because we're not as strong as men. And there are men that abuse that. So there are differences between the sexes, and that means that there are, in terms of sex, not gender, so there are different issues faced by each sex. And all that I was saying in these posts is that we know a lot about the issues faced by women. We talk about it a lot. It's been given a lot of airtime. Maybe we should do the same for men's issues. Maybe that's important too. Maybe the fact that this man got really famous is a bit of an indicator, or, you know, an alarm bell that we ought to pay attention to. Yeah, it's been so between not hating men and not celebrating the death of a 96-year-old woman, I've lost, I don't know, some 5,000 followers, I think, in the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I've found, like, with losing followers, it's often when I am not what other people want me to be. You know, when you say things that they don't want you to say. Like, I don't think we should be mean to the Queen as she dies. It's like, well, that's
Yeah.
not what I want you to say. I want you to be,
Yeah. Be
F
awful.
the colonizers, and when you write, let's take care of men, it's like, no, F the man, F privilege. And it's like, you're not saying what I want you to say. So I'll see you later, when there's just one thing that's off. What's funny? When I lose followers, 75% of my followers are women. I lose followers when I post Kara, my wife.
Whoa.
I lost 2,000 yesterday because I posted us
posted
having
the
a baby
moon.
moon,
Yeah.
second baby on the way. So that means, oh well, he's really unattainable now. He's really not going to be with me now. And I lost 2,000 followers in a day. And so you're going to go,
Because
okay,
it was going to be so easy without Kara.
Yeah.
People are so funny.
Exactly. I mean, it's just funny. I don't know if those two things are a lot. I just say that they are. I do notice whenever I post Kara that it goes down, but that's it. I do think that it's so funny posting today. You either say what you want and you will get in trouble no matter what, or you just say nothing. The only way that you can not get in trouble today online or feel the brunt of people's sensitivities is just not to say anything.
Yeah. Say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. Can't remember whose quote that is. If you don't want to offend anybody, just, be a lump in the corner with your mouth shut. And that's your recipe for success. I don't know. It's really, really interesting.
It sounds attractive.
Look,
I want to do that. I wish I could shut up.
I don't see
Let
that
me
happening.
read you some statistics, though, because now I can't shut up. Let me read you some statistics, though, because on Saturday night, or was it Friday night, Real Time with Bill Maher had Professor Galloway of New York University.
Yeah.
And he presented some statistics in regards to young men and why he worries about the future of this country because of what's going on with disenfranchised young men. These were his statistics that he said. 7 out of 10 valedictorians are women. Boys are 50% more likely to be suspended from high school. Women are 2 times more likely to graduate college than men. And out of the men, this blew my mind. Out of the men under 30 in America, only 1 in 3 has had sex in the last year. Out of all the men in America under 30, only 1 in 3 has had sex in the last year. Isn't that? Well, because, and he said, like, we think of sex and we, and we're like, oh, well, but he's like, sex is like a huge thing. It means that we're relationally out there, that we're like getting out into society and meeting people and, and face to face with people. It's a huge like indicator of what's going on. What do you think about when you hear those statistics?
It's not surprising because there's again there's so much happening. I'm still learning about these things, so I'm not gonna come at this like I'm an expert because I'm not. I'm immersing myself in this and trying to understand this problem. But when I hear things like that, it's not because I know there's similar figures for university. Far more men drop out and far less men graduate than women. So that's something. In terms of sex, I don't know. I think there's this whole incel culture. So there's 2 sides of that because some are involuntarily celibate, but there's also this group of men that seems to be men going their own way or something. That seems to be part of the manosphere, that they're so sick of being sidelined that they've decided they're just going to go and do their own thing away from the rest of society, which is quite interesting. There's something about boys not learning to read or write at the same rates girls do. And being able to read and write, literacy is a pretty important marker for whether you're going to be successful or you're going to fail. So that's really important too. So this is something that was in one of Dr. Warren Farrell's stats, because he's been talking a lot about the boy crisis as opposed to the male crisis, which is really interesting. And something that he identified is that in developed countries, in all 53 developed countries, boys on almost every single metric there is are performing worse than girls. and have higher rates of mental health problems. So again, there seems to be something pretty serious happening here that is just glossed over by everything. We don't talk about anything, and anyone who does is relegated to the scrap heap of MRAs and creeps and internalized misogyny and pick me, and just discredited and chucked aside. Anyone that talks about men is vilified and discredited and chucked aside. It's like they're not even, I don't know what it is, almost like they're angry that you're talking to that group. They don't even want us to talk to that group.
Yeah, it's. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this a few times because people mock him for, or say like, yeah, but all of your followers, are men, or all people who listen to you are men, and he's like, why is that a problem? Why would that be a problem? What, are they not allowed to be talked to? Are they not? Has it got to be for everybody at all times? What if there are particular issues for men, which there are, which need to be spoken about?
Yeah.
But here's my question about what's going on with, boys, particularly their mental health and their ability to, do well in school, etc. What is that a sign of? Like, is it because I do get the sense like, is this a societal in these Western nations, particularly, is this a societal thing that we push towards feminism and making sure that women have equality and have more? And men and boys are losing because of that, but it can't be that. Is it something else? Is it that, or what is it?
I don't know if it's that simple. I don't think we can blame all of it on feminism, and there's a need for feminism. But what I have to wonder about is, when do we know that feminism has succeeded? Serious question. And when has feminism done? Because when you think about feminism of the past, it was to get the vote, for example. But even history has been like feminist washed. So, the whole suffragette movement, and is about women didn't have the vote and women fought and got the vote, etc. And that's great. But there was also a men's suffrage movement, and working class men didn't have the vote either, but we don't talk about that. It's always the sort of story that everyone thinks is true is that all men had the vote and all women didn't. It's only upper class men that had the vote, men who owned property. It wasn't all the other people, the people of color, the working class men, women, no one had the vote. So it wasn't that straightforward. So that's one thing. And, even this idea of sort of patriarchy, I think in the West, it's an outdated theory now. I really, really do. The definition of patriarchy is a system where men have all the power and women are excluded from it. Well, we've just had a queen who was ruled for 70 years. That was a woman. The prime minister is now a woman in the UK, Liz Truss. The vice president of the most powerful country in the world is a woman. So it's not that women are being excluded.
She's pretty much the
power.
President.
Yeah, she's pretty much the president. Yeah,
he can't say a sentence, so I think she's pretty much the president.
And not just that, but then we have, the argument to that seems to be, but it's more men are represented though. There's less women. Yeah, but the point is, there's nothing standing in a woman's way. If I decide now that I want to go and campaign and become an MP and then make politics my career, there's nothing. In terms of the law that's standing in my way, absolutely nothing. And that is the point, but we won't look at that, will we? It's just one rhetoric. And it's the same with boys. I think the reason women got so angry with my post, and this was the overarching message I got, was, what about us? What about women? Why aren't you talking about women? You don't talk about women's mental health though. And it was incredible. It was sort of like, the whole mental health field is geared towards women. Like, are you hearing yourself? The entire therapy field is female dominated, and it caters to women much more than men. Or like female typical behavior, it's all geared towards that. And I think the anger was that something was about men for 5 minutes and that it wasn't attacking them. I think that's what the anger was about. And it's completely socially accepted to attack men. And this whole, I think the reason they got so angry with the male privilege post was, but why are you saying that? Or was the discrediting, or are you saying you don't believe in male privilege? And like, actually, yeah, I'm questioning the idea. Sue me, but I'm questioning it. Because, you know, when you think about your average working class man, or the man who comes to take your, you know, the bin men, what is their male privilege? What privilege do they have by the patriarchy coming and taking away your rubbish? Or the men that bring your Amazon Prime or your Uber Eats? When is their privilege kicking in? You know, so there's different problems each sex has, and we shouldn't discredit or downplay any of them, but making it so all of women's problems are caused by men. No, they're caused by some men, right? There's some men who are violent, and there's some men, but do you know who else they target? Other men. And they, you know, the response to that again is, you know, so the statistic for that, 80% of people who are murdered are men. I mean, we don't talk about that either. We talk about the violence against women. We never talk about the violence against men. And they'll say, yeah, but that's a male-caused problem, so it's their own problem. Well, someone made a really good point in my Twitter comments, this guy, and he said, why are they saying that all men are one group? Why just stop there? Why not zoom out further at human beings? But again, that's not allowed. It has to be a zero-sum game where if men gain, then women lose. If women gain, then men lose.
This is part of what I was talking about before. It's like there's not enough for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to make sure that it's all for women and none for men. You know, that's what I'm talking about. It's like this, like, it's a scarcity. Like joy is a scarcity, or happiness is a scarcity. Doing well is a scarcity. So make sure that none of it's for men and all of it's going to women, because, you know, men have won across history and are just, and you know, and then you see the gardeners in LA, and you see the guys, you know, exactly doing the rubbish, and you're like, what? Any woman they have it over every woman? Like they have more privilege than any woman out there? I just think it's such a, you know, I think we're better than this. Like, I think we all know that we're a bit better than this. The privilege isn't just based on purely identity.
It's like a mainstream thing, and maybe it's just a social media mainstream thing. I think if you get off social media, most people are fairly normal and reasonable, and if you talk about these issues, you find common ground. On social media, you just get screeching, right? Once the screeching starts, that's it. You just sit there and take the screeching, and we've been given this one lens to look at the world through, right? And we're all being forced to look through this, like it's forced on everyone's eyes. You have to look at the world through, you know, the haves and the have-nots, and then you need to be really resentful. And like the whole, you know, this exact what you've just described is why people thought it was okay to rejoice over the death of a 96-year-old woman and think that makes them good people. And it was incredible watching millennials say that, like, you know, I'm a survivor of colonization. It's like, no, you bloody aren't. Colonization was long gone before you were even an apple in your parents' eye, my dear. Like, you just weren't. Stop making things up. And it's the same with men. And this idea of patriarchy. Well, if you must, you know, if you can't go to sleep at night and can't digest your food without believing there's a patriarchy, well, then there's a few men at the top, and they can be the rest of the men aren't, right? And if you insist on this idea of patriarchy hurts, yeah, fine. If by that framing, sure. I don't believe it, though. I don't think there's just a few men at the top. I think there's a few people who have power. Government power is distributed among men and women, and more than anything, inequality is based in class, not in all this, I don't know, identity stuff. The people, you know, the identity stuff makes it so millionaires can say they're oppressed, and working class men are considered the biggest oppressors of all of society. And they're doing what? Taking away your rubber. That's your oppressor. And you'll find who says this the most: middle class women talk about being, you know, the male privilege thing. And it's like, you're sitting at home on your laptop earning really good money in a nice house, but the man who just delivered your coffee that you ordered, that's your oppressor. Get real.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing about the idea of male privilege and the people who spout about it is that, so male privilege is across all men, even of color. You know, it's like, wait, hold on a second. Aren't you about identity? And, you know, if you're a person of color, therefore you're oppressed. And, but men are also people of color too, but they have the privilege because they're men. So you know, how does this play in? And if you're a white woman, well, then you're oppressed because you're a woman, but you're not oppressed because you're white. But so you're kind of half oppressed. And then are you more oppressed or less oppressed than a person of color who's a man? But they're privileged because they're a man, but they're not privileged because they're a person of color. So they're kind of 50% oppressed too. So you know, that's where this type of, it has to get mathematical, but it's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's so dumb.
I mean, this is all of intersectionality. And I think the point of intersectionality originally was that it was a legal thing, I believe. And it was so that you could look at cross sections of people and try and understand the way they've been impacted within the law in a way that you might otherwise miss. You think about the fact that, you know, a black woman for certain reasons would have it more difficult than a black man. But that's not how it's applied anymore. It's, you know, it's been, once again, become this memification of these theories, right? Unproven theories and unproven sort of ways of looking at the world. And now we have to look at the world that way. And it does get really ridiculous. It's sort of, I'll sometimes use it back to them. Somebody came to my page a couple of days ago to scold me and tell me, how dare you're basically a colonialist because you've said something nice about the Queen. I was like, well, as far as I can tell, you're a white descendant of colonizers and I'm a woman of color and my country was colonized. So frankly, this is a microaggression. She didn't like that. It absolutely flipped her lid at me.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's good. You know, using their language against them is always fun.
Well, you have to, because if they really believe these things, then explain why it's okay to attack me. If you really believe the stuff that you think, why is it okay to attack somebody who's as intersectional as me? It's not. But it's just not a useful way of looking at the world. I think it really breeds resentment. And it has you constantly looking out for something wrong that you can pick up on and you know, they call it problematizing, constantly finding some way that racism or misogyny or something, there's no room for people to make innocuous mistakes. There's no room for people to make mistakes full stop. You know, it's so religious. It's about purity, moral purity within this, you know, intersectional theory.
Yeah, let's get practical for a second, if you don't mind. Just in case there are any young men out there listening to this, or, you know, disenfranchised men or men who verge on that, or people who know men who verge on disenfranchised or are disenfranchised. You're a therapist. What can they do? Well,
for one, I think therapy's become this meme to say men will do X instead of going to therapy. And I don't think the answer for everybody is therapy. And again, that's the thing of like the female typical behavior has been made the default and male typical behavior is bad behavior. So not everyone resonates with therapy, and that's okay. Not everybody wants to sit in a room and talk about their feelings. I think there's a major disconnect. People don't actually understand what therapy is. I think if men had a better understanding of how analytical good proper therapy actually is, it might appeal to them more. But I think something that's really important is social support. So even if you don't initially feel right, therapy is for me, think about social support in other ways. And something that I think all men need is brotherhood. That seems really important. Other men to be around, other men who understand. again, it comes to like all men don't want to talk about their feelings, but you find that when the way men communicate with each other, so much is said, but not in words, in presence, in I get that, in a clap on the back, in doing something together. I don't know, going and playing a sport together or something. That is really, really important. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think men really do need healthy outlets for aggression. So whatever that might be, combat sports or lifting weights or, I don't know, digging a hole in your garden. I don't know, but like men need some
exercise,
kind of
just in general,
healthy outlet,
like a place to grit your teeth, give it your best, sweat, growl. I was listening to, as I was saying, Professor Galloway from New York University say that, working from home is a disaster for young men. Young men need to make sure that they shower and put on a clean shirt, and they need the guardrails of being able to read a room. They need social connection in order to figure out like how I'm supposed to be and live my life. I really loved the analogy of guardrail, like young men need guardrails.
Yeah.
But I also just think it's so important socially to figure out how to talk to people and, get out and to get out there in person and be able to like converse and ask questions and be interested. And, you work from home and then you go out on an online date. Let's just say you're lucky enough to get one of those on a Friday night. You don't know how to converse. So then you're stuffed either way, so the importance of being able to converse, the importance of socialization, the importance of like you said, community, brotherhood, letting out aggression in a healthy way, not getting drunk and high during the week, so you can go out and let loose every once in a while.
That's the other thing of the statistics. So there was some more men develop alcohol dependence and more men use and die from illicit drugs. And I think that's because they lack what happens is like we use things like these substances or use alcohol or, like drowning your sorrows. If you don't have anywhere to turn and you're carrying this burden and there's so much stigma around men actually coming out and saying what is perceived as weak, I think it's just, you're so much more likely to figure out something you can do for yourself that numbs the way you're feeling. And I think that's a really, really big part of it. So that's why social support or some kind of connection with other people is really important. I think most men don't open up emotionally to anyone except for their intimate partners. And I hope we can change that. I really, really do. And then when it comes to therapy, I think, there are, some men do feel more comfortable with men, just like some women feel more comfortable with women. Seeking out a male therapist, maybe that's the way to access psychological therapies. And also to understand that proper psychotherapy isn't just sitting there and, like hashing out, talking about your feelings and crying and being told I validate you. It's actually work. It's analytical, it's back and forth. It's sort of excavating things that have never had room to be looked at before. It's about making meaningful change in your life. It's, it's not necessarily what you think it's going to be. So I think that's important to say as well. But if you can get some of those elements down, start with brotherhood. I think that's achievable for a lot of guys, I hope. It's interesting what you said about hopefully they go on a date and whatever, but that's another part of it. Men are doing so badly on dating apps. Like I remember when I was on the apps, I could just, no matter who I swiped right on, I'd match with them. Whereas men can swipe right 1,000 times and match with no one. Absolutely no one. So there's like a few men who do really well off dating apps, but the majority of men don't. And there's so many layers to this, the way we're kind of living online now rather than in person, the commodification of people, because that's what a dating app really is, right? You're looking at people like their products, and buying or not buying, and the alienation of men. And then women also worry for their own reasons of, is it safe to, it's just, there's so much here that's really hard to even pass out.
You follow Rob Henderson, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. Anyway, I saw a post by him the other day saying that most women have their height the height of the men that they want set to 6 foot and above, which is only 13% of men on dating apps are 6 foot and above. So like naturally, what they're saying is that it's like there's what is it? It's like 85% of men out there on dating apps are like not even being seen.
And we could say something else to that. I noticed when I was on the apps that men who are 6 foot or even just below 6 foot, they always have it in their profile, hoping that that'll get them a swipe. But imagine if men, or not imagine if, whenever men have something that goes the other way, like if men had a height prerequisite for women or a weight prerequisite for women, imagine how that would go down. It's just, we do have a lot of double standards here.
Yeah. I want to speak just a little bit more about what we can do for young men. Let me just speak about my experiences with practically talking to people, men in particular, about their feelings and having them open up. I had a talk with a friend the other day he was telling me about a chat that he'd had with another friend, and the friend was like, "I've had a really hard year this year." And he responded, my friend just said, "Well, I'm always here if you want to talk." And then that was the end of the conversation. And I said, I didn't scold him, but I was like, "Look, that's not how you do it. Because if you tell somebody you can always come and talk to me, they're not going to, particularly men, they're not going to do it. You need to go to them, or you can always call me." No, call them and ask twice. "How are you?" "I'm fine." No. "How are you really?" Twice. Strong people, particularly men who've been told they need to be strong in order to be men, in order to be worthy of love, they need to be asked a couple of times. And not just men. I'm sure there are women out there who are just like that too, who really need to be given the opportunity to be right, like you, who really need to be given the opportunity and know that there's an open ear right here. I want you to tell me. I really want you to tell me how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, when we look at the mainstream stuff about therapy online, like Insta therapy, or just, which kind of leads the conversation on this. It's absolutely geared towards one small group, it's usually middle-class, liberal, affluent women making content for liberal class. Oh, I can't say the tongue twister. Making content for that group, and it leaves out everybody else. It leaves out people who are low in neuroticism. It leaves out all the men. It leaves out people who aren't that, on the thinker-feeler spectrum, are more thinkers rather than feelers. It leaves out anybody who's a little bit stoic. It leaves out swathes of personality types. It's just for that one tiny demographic. And things like I'll the kind of advice they give you about boundaries and how to offer care or support or whatever, that doesn't work for most of us. And you do need to put in a bit more effort than assuming everybody's as much of a sort of emotionally communicative as you, because not everyone is. And
talking to a man who's a bricklayer and asking him his attachment style, or telling him about tell me about, it's like he doesn't know what you're talking about, and then saying everything like, are you gaslighting or gatekeeping? Let's talk about trauma bonding. It's like, he doesn't know what you're talking about. Maybe we should, meet on this person's level so that we can actually have a conversation.
And there's nothing wrong with the fact that he doesn't know what you're talking about. And it's not flawed in any way. Not everybody needs to or is interested in, this pop psychology buzzword nonsense. Not everyone's interested in it. And it's fine. I'm a therapist and I hate it. It's okay. You don't just act like a normal person, and you don't have to go to people and say, "You are worthy," or any of that.
Yes.
You can literally just, be there, just be a normal person and be there with them or for them. And
you could that would be a very funny you know, you are worthy. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? I know you have trauma. What are you talking about? What are we talking about right now? You don't want to talk about your feelings. I think this is trauma. It's like,
are you gaslighting me?
Stop.
You're totally gaslighting me, bricklayer.
You're gatekeeping the term gaslighting. I want to ask you about, because you're a POM, you're a Brit. If you don't know what POM is, it's what Aussies call Brits. It means prisoner of Mother England. So what's going on over there, man? Because you poor, it's been sad. It's been a sad week, hasn't it? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So most of Britons, it's a funny mix because Brits don't behave like Americans. So even the ones who don't like the monarchy and the ones who think, we really need to rethink this now, they're not going to be screaming, colonizer, thank God. That's just not how Brits behave. So most people, I think, find it quite sad because it is a bit of an end of an era. Whether or not you agree with it, I'm not a monarchist or a royalist. I think taxpayers should not be funding them. But an old lady who gave her life for this country and has kind of been a bit of a touchstone, hasn't she? For me, it felt sad because I thought she's ruled all of my life and she ruled all of my mum's life. And, for me, I'm grieving, and someone said very eloquently, all of us have these embers of grief within us. And when someone that we don't know who's famous dies, there's a way to sort of publicly grieve together, because grief is normally really lonely. And I think there's a lot of that. I think a lot of people really, really did love the Queen. There's a lot of Brits who really did love her, and that's okay. They're allowed to, and they are sad, and it's sort of the end of a certain chapter in history. And but so there's a lot. I think it's quite somber. Equally, a lot of people are not fans of Charles, so that's kind of coming up as well. But most people tend to be, even if you don't like her or don't care, people are quite respectful, I think.
Yeah,
except on social media.
I struggle to say what I loved about the Queen or what she did that was so great. But I loved her, and I just can't tell you why. She was always there, I suppose, like you said. She was just always there, like a touchstone. Yeah. And I know that she did do great things.
Well, familiarity.
I kind of watched The Crown, and familiarity. Yeah, I watched The Crown and was like, oh, I think I love this woman. Seemed to just be like a lot of burden to be put on a person's shoulders without their consent, really. It was like, I was born into this, and here I am, and this is really tough. The media is always watching me. But also, this is a person who, supported Winston Churchill as the POMs, went to fight Hitler. It's pretty big.
Yeah. There's that. There's all those chapters in history, her coronation was when Winston Churchill that was her first prime minister, and she's gone through, been there through so many, all the different things she's done. And when you think of celebrities, you sign up to, for you're an actor and you signed up to go and be a public figure and to have people scrutinize you and I guess all that stuff. But she was born into it, and she knew she was never going to be able to choose her path. Her path was laid out before her. And I think things like The Crown, they humanize these people. And just on a human being level, like a human to human level, you can think, oh, that must have been tough, right? To not have a choice about your future, have absolutely no say in it. But you go and you give yourself to it fully and perform your duties with dignity and whenever she needed to, or even when she didn't need to show up for the country. Again, you don't have to love the monarchy to see that those are admirable qualities. But no, sorry, that's not allowed. So you're going to have to edit out of the podcast.
What? Which bit?
You're going to have to edit all of that. Anything good we've said about her. I'm joking.
No, totally. It's funny, isn't it? Because we're talking about somebody and we're almost talking about them as if they were oppressed when, in the ideology of the oppressed versus the oppressor, she is the oppressor, but we can empathize with her by looking at her life and going, oh, that would have been hard.
They're so historically illiterate. Illiterate because she saw the decolonization, oversaw that. That was her reign. She was never part of it. But then they do their mental gymnastics and then they say, yeah, but she was a symbol of a past of imperialism and, all these people who have been hurt by colonization. I was like, well, my family was hurt by colonization. They had to leave Pakistan and come to India when the two countries were sort of divided, or the country was divided and lost everything and had to rebuild from the ground up. And it was partition was this awful, awful business. And under colonization or colonialism, there was, a lot of things happened. But it's like they don't realize there's the whole history that happened before fucking colonialism. That wasn't the only thing in all of history. Like before the Brits invaded India, the Mughals did. Before the Mughals did, the Persians and the Greeks did. Before them, the Aryans did. Alexander the Great was a
people of color. They didn't do it ever.
Yeah, no. And then look what we're doing to Kashmir now. India, the oppressed. Well, look what we're doing to Kashmir. And we're just, it's ridiculous. And at some point, it's the same people who will be 40, 50 or 60 and still saying, oh, my mom didn't hug me enough. It's the same sort of psychology to say 200 years ago, this thing happened and I'm going to still have a personal grievance about it. But at some point, you have to move on, decide to live for yourself. It's your choice. It really is. But don't vilify the rest of us who don't want to sit there absolutely mired in grievance.
Yeah, I heard somebody, my friend the other day was speaking to me about he had a horrible disease as a kid and he nearly died. And he's a celebrity and a lot of people come to him and say, hey, could you speak up about this disease that you had because my son has it, or could you please promote my son's GoFundMe because he has this disease? And he's always a little bit trepidatious about it because he says, I don't want to be defined by the things that have set me back, that have been hard for me. I want to be defined by overcoming those things. And I thought that was such an interesting way of thinking about it. And I think it's what you're saying now. It's like, I don't want to be defined by how horrible colonialism was to my family. I don't want to be defined by the difficulties that I go through. I kind of want to be defined by my overcoming of those things. Is that right?
Yeah. It's really funny you said that because I think I tweeted that almost verbatim, that I'm not a victim. I'm the person that overcomes, something like that. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And there's so much more that defines us than us being men or women or people of color or white or whatever. Instead of dividing, and again, this is going to be said, your privilege is showing. No, if I really tell you about my history and about what, I've had to go through and in some ways are still going through, I'm not fucking privileged. So, that argument can be flushed down the toilet, but we need to stop this. What we've been doing the last few years is we're tearing ourselves apart. We dehumanize people. This whole episode of women crowing about let's bring the numbers up to 10 on 10. Isn't it great that men kill themselves? If you can't see that this is a sign something has terribly gone wrong, then I can't really help you. I hope people can take heed of this and we can stop this constant, if you have something, I can't have it sort of thing.
Yes, there's enough meaning, joy, happiness at the table for everybody. It's an infinite resource. We don't have to cut other people out of the pie in order to have more pie ourselves. It's like there's no it's an infinite pie. and I just, it's unfathomable, the stupidity of those thoughts. And like I said before, like these are the people who crow about, racism and sexism, but will paint the entire gender of male, paint the entire sex of male to be worth killing themselves, not knowing that they're actually talking about whether they like it or not. They're talking about men of color too. Yeah. And so they're kind of showing themselves, aren't they? They actually don't give a shit. They actually, there's no virtue here. It's actually like, kill them all.
No.
It's like, really? Some pretty huge dictators throughout history, I think you would learn to love,
Well, we have a whole, I think it's socially accepted sadism. It's a way to let all your base instincts and, the cruelty that we all have, we're all capable of. It's a way to let it out while believing that you're somehow morally superior or virtuous. It's a virtue signal now to be hateful as long as you hate the right people. Like, really think about that. It's a virtue signal to be hateful. As long as you hate the socially approved people. So, that's not a great quality. It shows that you're so easily led by what's happening around you. You can't think things through. And that if you have the opportunity, you will hurt people. You're okay with that.
Seerut, I love you. How do we keep in contact with you?
I'm on Instagram, which I don't know if anyone's seeing my posts anymore, but I'm there. And I'm on Twitter. And it was really funny. I saw today it was showing 10,000 followers, 0 non-followers. So they're really okay. So Instagram, Twitter. People. Yeah, this person says what's not socially approved. Hide her.
Instagram, Twitter,
and
you have a website too. And there's things going on your website right now, aren't there? Like you're doing a course or something.
Yes, I have a membership which is kind of like a response to these things. I'm fed up of the misinformation and of the ideology and all the stuff that we have to deal with on social media. So I wanted to create somewhere where you get a library of courses that we consistently add to, which are, no fluff, no nonsense, good info. There's no misinfo in them. And we do monthly hangouts where we can actually talk about these things off social media, face to face with other human beings. And it's people of different views. And it's so interesting. The conversations are really enriching and good. And we have a group forum, and I do webinars every time a new course goes up. So there's tons that I'm packing in there. And it's a monthly sort of subscription thing. And I have a Substack, which where I write articles and things like that.
I don't know why, but I just suddenly felt this urge to encourage you. I feel like, it's really hard. It feels like all you ever, we both follow a guy named BioLane, who's like a really loudmouth, very smart fitness influencer. I guess you'd call him. He's a doctor too. He's great.
Yeah.
But he's so smart. But so often what he does is calling out the misinformation of other people, when I know that he's got so much more to offer. And that's the one thing that annoys me about him. I can't say the same of you, but I will say that, it's good to focus on all the things that you do know that aren't in answer to the horrors and the stupidity of certain people online. And so I just want to encourage you, keep educating keep educating on things that you're passionate about that aren't in answer to the haters and to the mob. Keep putting your thing out there that's not about that too. It's hard, I know, because I know the feeling. But it's but you've got so much to offer that isn't just about cancel culture, the mob, like politics right now, and what's it called? Insta therapy. You've got a lot to give. So just keep giving us that too, even whilst you fight on against the mob.
I will. That's a good,
okay.
I will take that in, because there's definitely something I notice sometimes, everything is a not this. This is crap.
Right. Everything's an answer to something else. And, there are great thoughts that can, stand on their own 2 feet that you could put out to the world too, that you've got.
Yeah.
Well, you're a legend. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me on to talk about this. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. And I'll see you back on the online ranch, Queen.
Oh yeah.